Welcome to Mathematics 9. For today, we will be discussing about the graph of quadratic function. And our objective is illustrate quadratic equation using graph in our Cartesian coordinate plane. And first, let us recall the definition of quadratic equation. Quadratic equation or a quadratic function is any equation of the form f of x is equivalent to ax squared plus bx plus c, where a, b, and c are real numbers and a is not equal to 0. Where in this definition, we will just illustrate that x squared is the basic expression that can be expressed by quadratic equation. So therefore, as long as there is an x squared in our given expression, automatically we are given with quadratic equation. But first, syempre, x squared muna ang gagamitin natin because the graph of x squared will be our basic graph for us to compare the other expression and identify the different behavior or the movement of the graph. Yeah. Next, in quadratic equation, we have our parts in our graph. First is we have the vertex, defined as the turning point of the graph. Sa madaling salita, dito po nag-curve or dito po lumiko yung ating curve or ang ating graph, illustrated in our picture. Next, we have our axis of symmetry. Axis of symmetry is defined as a vertical line that passes through the vertex of the parabola. Just like in our illustration, axis of symmetry is the broken line that passes through the vertex. And also, this axis of symmetry divide the graph, divide the curve into two equal parts. Yeah. So next, let's recall our first behavior of the graph. Particularly in our previous video, in the part 1 of quadratic function, so you can pause for a minute and check the description below. So nandun po yung link for the part 1 of quadratic function, the first behavior of our graph. Such as in this video, it illustrated that given with a function of x is equivalent to ax squared, and we are involved with letter a. Such as, sabi doon, if a is positive, automatically it opens or it is opening upward. Such as in our graph, it illustrated in our red color graph. We have 2x squared in our first example. In our second example, we have if a is negative value, such as we have negative 2x squared, therefore, in our blue graph, it opens downward. So therefore, this is our first behavior of the graph. And also, in our first video, we say that and we illustrated that if a value is a large number or it is a big number, if we're talking about big number, it could be 1,000, 5, 10, 300, and so on and so forth. As long as it is a large number, the behavior of the graph is it will become narrow or it will become near to our y-axis or x-axis, depending on how it is illustrated. Next, if it is a smaller number, if a is a smaller number or small number, automatically the response of our graph will become wide or will become so open. If we're talking about small number, we are referring to fractions, decimal, and small value. So that is our first behavior of the graph, and we are referring to letter A. So now, let us proceed to our second behavior of our graph. Particularly, we are given with the graph of f of x is equivalent to x squared plus k, where x squared is our basic expression to express quadratic equation, and we are given now with plus k. In plus k is any positive, negative number, or any number that we can think of. It could be a positive 2, it could be a negative 2, it could be 100 or 1,000 or negative number. It could be a decimal value, it could be a fractional value, as long as it is a real number. Next, so now we will now identify the behavior of our graph if we are given with a plus k or a plus 1 or a plus a number. So in terms of our example, we are given with 2. First is a function of x is equivalent, f of x is equivalent to x squared plus 2. And our second one is f of x is equivalent to x squared minus 2. So now let us begin. So, but first, we have our initial graph. This is the x squared, or this will be our original graph, and we will be comparing our graph for x squared minus 2 and x squared plus 2 and identify what happened. Ready? So let us first have x squared plus 2. So in x squared plus 2, we have our table of values, and we need to identify the value of y. So let us solve. So let us proceed first with x is equivalent to 2, negative 2. So substituting the value of x, we have f of negative 2 is equivalent to negative 2 squared plus 2. F of negative 2 is equivalent to, so negative 2 squared is 4 plus 2, or simply f of negative 2 is equivalent to 4 plus 2 is just simply 6. So therefore, this 6 will be written here. Next, we have x is equivalent to negative 1. So we have f of negative 1 is equivalent to negative 1 squared plus 2. F of negative 1 is equivalent to negative 1 squared is just simply 1 plus 2. So f of negative 1 is equivalent to 1 plus 2 is just simply 3. Next, we have our third one. We have x is equivalent to 0. F of 0 is equivalent to 0 squared plus 2. But 0 squared is just 0. So therefore, f of 0 is equivalent to 2 only. So that is just right there. Next, our fourth one, we have x is equivalent to 1. Therefore, we have f of 1 is equivalent to 1 squared plus 2. F of 1 is equivalent to, so 1 squared is 1 plus 2, or simply f of 1 is equivalent to 3. So writing it there. Lastly, we have x is equivalent to positive 2. So f of 2 is equivalent to 2 squared plus 2. Simplifying, f of 2 is equivalent to 2 squared is 4 plus 2, or simply f of 2 is equivalent to 6. So we have this value. Therefore, we completed the table of values. So now let us identify the coordinates of our graph. So we have first, we have negative 2 comma 6, we have negative 1 comma 3, we have 0 comma 2, we have 1 comma 3, and lastly we have 2 comma 6. So these following numbers, or these following coordinates will be plotted in our graph. Let us proceed. So I'll just make it positive. So first we have our coordinates. So negative 2 comma 6. So we have negative 1 comma 3. We have 0 comma 2. We have 1 comma 3. And lastly, we have 2 comma 6. So these values will be plotted. So let us plot our first coordinate. We have negative 2 comma 6. So ano yung negative 2 comma 6 natin? So we have negative 2 comma 6 is more likely here. Tama? Followed by our second coordinate. This is our second coordinate. We have negative 1 comma 3. So we have negative 1 comma 3 is more likely here. Followed by 0 comma 2. So it's more likely here. And we have, sorry. And the fourth one, we have 1 comma 3 is more likely here. And we have 2 comma 6 we have here. So let us connect the points. So we have more likely, we have, And don't forget to extend our graph. So let us just extend it. Yeah. So mukhang pangit yung drawing natin, pero okay lang. Just let us just imagine that is a perfect curve. So what happened in our graph? Do you think what happened after graphing our points? Yeah. Anybody? So just pause for a while and think about it, what happened in our graph, and you can play it back and answer within for yourself. Yeah. Okay, so in terms of year, that's good. So if we're given with x squared plus 2 or x squared plus k and k is positive, automatically our response or the graph response is that the red graph or it happened that the graph moved upward. So madaling salita, umakyat siya ng dalawang beses sa taas. Tama po ba? Because of the plus 2. From our original graph, we have the black color. It moved upward. Tama po ba? So therefore, that is our second behavior. If k is positive, therefore it will move upward. And after that, later we will be checking the response if x squared minus 2. So ano namang mangyayari sa x squared minus 2? So sige, let us try to solve it. So let us solve. So we have x squared minus 2 and let us solve the value of y. We have x is equivalent to negative 2. F of negative 2 is equivalent to, we have negative 2 squared minus 2. F of negative 2 is equivalent to, so negative 2 squared is 4 minus 2 or just simply 2. So therefore, let us just write it. Next, x is equivalent to negative 1. So f of negative 1 is equivalent to negative 1 squared minus 2. So f of negative 1 is equivalent to negative 1 squared is 1 minus 2, or simply f of negative 1 is just simply negative 1. Next, we have x is equivalent to 0. X is equivalent to 0, so f of 0 is equivalent to, so 0 squared minus 2, or simply 0 squared is just 0, so 0 minus 2 is negative 2. Next, x is equivalent to 1. F of 1 is equivalent to 1 squared minus 2. F of 1 is equivalent to 1 squared is 1 minus 2, or simply f of 1 is equivalent to 1 minus 2 is negative 1. And lastly, we have x is equivalent to 2. So f of 2 is equivalent to 2 squared minus 2, or simply f of 2 is equivalent to 2 squared is 4 minus 2, or simply f of 2 is equivalent to positive 2. So therefore, we already got the values of y. So now, let us identify the coordinates. So identifying the coordinates, so we have our first coordinate, we have negative 2, 2. We have negative 1, 1. We have 0, negative 2. We have 1, negative 1. And lastly, we have 2, 2. So these coordinates will be plotted in our Cartesian coordinate plane together with our previous graphs. So let us solve. So what happened in our graph? So let us proceed to our original. So we have, let us use x squared minus 2 for our blue color. So our first coordinate, we have negative 2, 2. We have negative 1, and then we have negative 1, 1. We have 0, negative 2. We have 1, 1, and we have negative 2, sorry, positive 2, 2. So let's check lang kung tama. Okay. So that is our values. So now let us identify if our given coordinates are correct, and also let us identify the behavior of our graph given with k is negative. So let us plot. We have negative 2 comma 2 is more likely here. We have negative 1 comma 1 is more likely here. We have 0 comma negative 2 is here. Negative 1 comma negative 1 is here. And we have 2 comma 2 is more likely here. So let us graph. Yeah, so in terms of here, we have x squared minus 2. And the red color is we have x squared plus 2. So now, ano nang naging behavior natin? So therefore, we can say that if k is negative, therefore the graph move downward. So therefore, that is our behavior if k is negative. And let us just write, if k is positive, therefore it moves upward. So therefore, in our conclusion, this will be our behavior of the graph involving k. So to summarize it, so let us just illustrate it in the graph, the correct illustration. So sabi dyan, if k is positive, it moves upward, and if it is negative, it moves downward.